Julie's tobogganing tragedy. During the New Year holiday, Julie decided to take a trip to Japan. She had been there once before and enjoyed it so much that she decided to go back a second time. It was her favorite place to go. On her previous visit, she had checked out all the usual tourist destinations. They were great, but this time she wanted to try something different, something more exciting, and something she had never done before. Seeing it was winter, she felt the obvious choice was skiing, but unfortunately, all the ski resorts were booked full. The only other option was tobogganing. It seemed a bit childish, but beggars can't be choosers, so she decided to try it. When she arrived at the hill, the beauty of the winter landscape impressed her. Snow covered everything, the trees, the buildings, and even the children. It was also very cold, but the excitement of trying something new made the temperature more bearable. She found a small shack where they rented sleds. They were a little on the small side. After all, tobogganing is mostly for children. But the man who worked there assured her that many adults used them, and it was nothing to be ashamed of. She shelled out the cash, grabbed a sled, and headed for the top of the hill. The hill wasn't terribly big, but Julie didn't realize that walking up a snow-covered hill was a lot more difficult than it looked. Her steps were higher and required more energy than usual, but she kept her head down and ascended the hill, slowly but surely. By the time she reached the top, she was completely out of breath. She set the toboggan down on the slippery slope and bent down to tie her winter boots. When she lifted her head again, she saw the sled flying down the hill without her. She had learned her first tobogganing lesson. Always keep the rope in your hand. Back down the hill she went on foot. Now on the top for a second time, she kept a tight grip on the rope. She stepped into the sleigh, and whoosh! It shot out from underneath her and flew down the hill without her again. Lesson 2 was finished. Never stand up in a sled. Back down the hill she went on foot. The third time at the top, she was more than ready to toboggan. She was also tired of going up and down the hill on foot. People were also starting to point at her and snicker, which didn't make her feel any better about the whole thing. If she didn't make it down this time, she didn't know if she could walk all the way up again, or endure the taunting of the children. Carefully she put one foot on either side of the sled, and slowly sat down as if mounting a wild horse. To her surprise, the sled didn't move as she had expected it to. So she used her hands and pushed herself along to get moving. The toboggan began to move and pick up speed. Julie held the sides tightly. "Whee!" she said as she slid down the hill. It was more fun than she could have imagined. Faster and faster she went down the snowy hillside. Now Julie was going so fast that her eyes were beginning to water. She flew by other sleds as if they were standing still, and was still picking up speed. Why weren't the children going so fast? Julie thought. Then she remembered a few things about physics that frightened her. Her wheeze suddenly became screams of terror as she realized that she was heading straight toward the rental shack at what seemed like terminal velocity. Panicking, she dug her right hand into the slope. It did little to slow her down, but she was now veering right and away from the shack. Unfortunately, the only thing on the right was a forest of pine trees. Julie bailed from the runaway sled just in the nick of time. The sleigh crashed hard into a big pine tree and shattered into numerous pieces. Meanwhile, she tumbled out of control like a rag doll, before coming to a stop upside down in a deep powdery snowdrift. At least nothing was broken, she hoped. Looking back across the hill, she saw her mitts, toque, boots, and scarf strewn about. It looked like a yard sale. She gathered her things, and a few bigger pieces of what was left of the sled, and went back to the rental shack. The man looked oddly at Julie as she approached with an armful of clothes and unrecognizable plastic parts. He took the pieces of the sled from her hands and chuckled. "Don't worry about it," is all he said, then added, These things are cheap like borscht." Julie could only feign a smile, but she was deeply thankful that this tragedy hadn't cost her anything more than a bit of pride. She would realize later, though definitely not now, that this event would become one of her longest-lasting memories of Japan, and would be a story she would never tire of telling.